If their first two albums at times were a bit soft for my taste, then Alter Bridge's third album, 2010's ABIII, takes that even further. This is almost an album completely made of ballads. I think they were going for something darker and more moody on here, but all I can hear is nothing but ballads, and that's just not what I'm really interested in when I listen to an album. There are plenty of ballads that I do enjoy, but ultimately I am a fan of hard rock and heavy metal and don't want a full album of ballads, and that's mostly what this is. There are two heavier songs. There's also a song that has a soft first verse and then is reasonably heavy the rest of the way through. But other than that, the album is nothing but ballads. The production is fine, the band sounds fine, but with every song being pretty much a ballad, there's no room for diversity or growth for the band. It feels like they've regressed as they've taken out the rock or metal element of the band that they had occasionally in the first two albums. The album opens with these songs Slip to the Void, and any self-righteous jackass who wants to call their sixth album Growth because they threw in synths clearly forgot about this track, which was done a whole lot better than anything on that album. If you're listening to this discography in the playlist, well, we'll get there. The song starts off with some synths and Miles singing in a really quiet tone. The song starts off with a really cool atmosphere here. As the verse is continuing, some acoustic guitars start playing, and it really feels like the song is building towards something. We get to a section that builds, for the second verse, what will be building towards the first chorus. We don't get a chorus after this first verse. But this section is really cool and offers a change and really makes it feel like the song is building towards something. And then we get a section I don't really like, where Mark plays a couple of chords, letting one ring out, plays a couple more chords, letting one ring out, while some drums play, a little beat, and then they kick into the second verse, which is heavier. I feel like they should have just gone straight into the second verse. I think that would have transitioned a lot better. The second verse is really nice. I like how Miles changes from singing really quiet to singing a lot louder. The song does do a good job of being able to fit a soft and heavier style. Again, we get that nice build towards the chorus, and here we actually get a chorus, which is a good chorus. It does feel a little jarring, like it doesn't quite fit the mood of the song, but it still works nonetheless. And then we get the section where the band can't decide if they want to do a bridge or do a solo. They really should have just did the solo, then did a bridge, and then did the final chorus. But instead, they just kind of rotate between some vocals, and then about 5 seconds of lead. Did that a couple times. And all I could think of during this section was, shut the fuck up and let the guitar solo play. And then we get that annoying chord section that I mentioned that we got after the first verse, and then we get the final chorus and the song ends. I think this is an excellent track, and it shows a lot of growth for the band, showing them trying something new and actually succeeding. Yeah, I have a couple of small complaints about this track, but it's still really good and among my favorite Alter Bridge songs. Isolation is a pretty basic hard rock song. This is one of only 2 heavier songs on the album. The verses have a pretty decent pace to them, a decent guitar riff playing, nothing spectacular, but good enough. Miles sounds great as always on vocals. There are occasions during these verses where you get a nice lead guitar lick, which sounds pretty cool. The strength for me for this song is the chorus, which I think is really good and brings everything else, which is competently played together. I still do really like this track, but there's not a whole lot to say about it. I do get irritated though that the solo lasts maybe 10 seconds at most. You'd think they could have bumped that up to 30, but oh well. Other than that, it's a pretty good song. Ghost of Days Gone By reminds me of the song they would record a couple albums later, My Champion. This song definitely has a made-for-radio feel to it throughout the verses. Miles sounds really nice on here. The guitars have a kind of cool effect on them. This is more of an up-tempo, soft song. I don't know if you would classify this as a ballad. I probably would, but I could see where somebody might not. The song itself is just okay. It doesn't really do anything a whole lot for me. It just feels like a radio song. There is a section during the bridge where the song gets a little heavier and Miles's vocals get a little bit more sinister, and that sounds pretty cool. But otherwise, it's pretty basic, made for radio song. It's not bad, but it's not really anything particularly great either. All Hope Is Gone is definitely a ballad. This is a lot slower paced song. It's a fairly soft song, especially in the first verse. The guitars have another effect on them, so at least they are mixing things up a little bit, at least with the effects. Miles's vocals are fine, but I don't know, for me the bulk of the song, the verses, the chorus, just don't do anything for me here. They're not awful by any means, but they just don't hit home for me. There's not a punch to the song that I feel like even in a good ballad there should be one. I do like that the second verse, the guitars get a little bit heavier and you have a lot of lead guitars being played over that verse. That does add to the depth of the song, the diversity, if you will. And there is a halfway decent guitar solo here, so there is a little bit to like about this track, and it's not awful by any means, but this one's not really doing it for me. Next we have the song Still Remains, and I think this song's most distinguishing feature has to be that it's one of only 2 heavier songs on this album. This song is at a mid-tempo pace. The main guitar riff is okay, I guess, but there's not really any kind of a punch to this song either. There's also no guitar solo. This song again just ends up being decent, but not really anything special. Till this point in the album, Make It Right is the worst song we've had so far. This is another ballad. The song does rotate between softer and heavier parts, but it's also really slow paced. This song doesn't have a distinguishable chorus. Nothing really seems to happen during it besides rotating between softer and heavier. There is a guitar solo, but it's at the very end of the song rather than breaking up the monotony of the rest of it. I don't like this song. Next we have yet another ballad, Wonderful Life, and I started cracking up laughing from the opening moments of this track. All I could think was, what am I listening to, a modern Bon Jovi song? This is not a good track at all. Honestly, this is one of the worst songs I've ever heard the band do. I don't care for this song at all. The production gives this song a lot of room to breathe, which is kind of cool. Miles, during the verses, sings with more of a pretty sounding voice, which is something different. But the melodies don't do anything. The song is really slow and doesn't really go anywhere. The guitars are just basic ballad acoustic guitars, nothing really special going on there. I don't feel this track at all. And I feel like this track was designed to elicit emotion from people, and I'm just not feeling it. It just feels like a cheap attempt at emotion, and it's not working for me. I really don't like this track. Next we have the song I Know It Hurts, and despite a heavier intro, this ends up being a fairly soft track. The chorus is a little heavier, but the verses are softer. This is a fairly up-tempo song. I really like the pacing of this track a lot. Miles's vocals are great. My favorite part of this song is the chorus, which I think is outstanding. Great melodies, great lyrics. I really like this track a lot. It's mostly a fairly basic, softer hard rock song, but for what it is, I think it's really good. Show Me a Sign feels like the song that never ends. It has a different mood than a lot of the other tracks on this album, which is nice, but it doesn't really do anything interesting to me. I feel like I've heard songs with this type of mood and pacing before done a lot better. It's not awful, but it's not anything that stands out either. Fallout is another song not unlike I Know It Hurts. Softer verses, heavier chorus, and I like this song quite a bit too. There's a guitar solo which unfortunately comes at the end of the track instead of in the middle of that. If you haven't noticed by now, that's a signature of Mark Tremonti's that kind of irritates me a little bit. You would think he could do a solo in the middle of the song and then one at the end of the song. Slash would do that, but then again, Slash is a good guitarist. Either way, I do like this song a lot. I think Miles does a great job. I think the music is pretty well done, even if it's nothing spectacular. Otherwise, it's a pretty basic track, but this is one I like quite a bit. Unfortunately, that's the last song I like on this album. Next we have Breathe Again, which is another ballad, and at this point I no longer care about ballads. It's pretty basic, it's not awful or anything, but it's also nothing particularly great, and nothing that stands out on this album. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this next song. Coeur d'Alene is a mix of softer parts and heavier sections. There are definitely more heavier sections in this track than most of the songs on this album, but there are some significant softer moments as well. The song has its own unique feel, which is kind of cool, but other than that, nothing really stands out too much for me. This song is pretty decent, but nothing special. I honestly don't remember Life Must Go On. It's another ballad, and forget what I said about the band no longer sounding like Creed, because the guitars sound exactly like something that would be in a Creed song. The album closes with the song Words Darker Than Their Wings, and all I want to hear is Broken Wings. It's an okay song, I guess. Nothing really special happens during it. It's mostly acoustic. The only interesting aspect of this song is the vocals are shared between Miles Kennedy and Mark Tremonti, which does add something slightly different to the song, but otherwise nothing really major. I feel like I've shat on this album possibly more than it deserves. I don't feel like it's a terrible album, but there's not really a whole lot that it does for me. I like 5 or 6 songs on here, and that's about it, and this album has 14 tracks. I feel like this band would be better served limiting their albums to about 10 songs. And I've heard the bonus tracks for this album, and they're all ballads too, nothing special either. Another YouTuber, Zach White, has mentioned that part of the appreciation for this album depends on your mindset going into it. And that could be what's causing me issues listening to this album this time. I'm definitely not feeling the ballad or soft song aspect of this album as I listen to it. This album's there, it's okay. It's really not as bad as I probably made it out to sound, but it's not particularly great either. It's a little more diverse than I gave it credit for at the start of this review, but again, still not really that special. There are a couple songs I really don't like, and that's really rare for me to say that I don't like an Alter Bridge song. Even the worst songs by them are usually okay at best, but there are those few that I do dislike, and there are a couple of them on here. And with so many ballads, the album loses my interest, and there's really not a whole lot interesting musically going on here. I'm going to give this album a 5 out of 10, middle of the road. It's there, it's not bad, some fans like it. If you like the softer side of Alter Bridge, you might like it. If you prefer songs like Cry of Achilles or Ties That Bind, then you're going to find this one disappointing.